is Taj of the Beat.
And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, guys, gals, and non-binary pals to another episode of All the Above, the show that gives you an unstandardized take on education. I'm Jeffrey Garrett, one of your co-hosts, and I've been a middle and high school principal and a high school social studies teacher. And as always, I'm joined by
Manuel Rustin, your favorite teacher's favorite teacher. I'm a high school history teacher in the Los Angeles area. This is my 16th year in the classroom, and this, of course, is All of the Above, your home for news and analysis of all matters pertaining to education. Now, Jeff, our previous episode, we talked about grading, and I think it struck a chord because we've had a lot of engagement with that episode about grading. Why do you think that might be, Jeff?
You know, I think it's just one of those topics that's so at the top of everyone's mind right now, right? And certainly among educators who are, we got progress reports coming up soon, and, end of year is right around the corner, and folks are really wondering, what to do. And then, of course, you got kids and families that are worried about college and college applications and GPA and just all of that stuff. So I think it struck a chord. I mean, heck, we even got major universities making policy decisions on grading now. So it is timely, shall we say?
Indeed. And for folks who are new to the show, we only talk about the important stuff, and we only have the dope guests. So if that was your first episode and you're joining us here for the second episode, thank you for coming back. But do remember, at our website, aotashow.com, we've got a ton of episodes about pretty much everything important and pressing in the matter in the world of education. So definitely check those out. Also, if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll notice that we are socially distanced. We're doing this remote recording thing. We're about 25 miles apart. And Jeff, I at first wasn't sure about keeping our show going outside of the TV studio, but I've come to learn that pretty much all the big dogs out there are doing it just like this, whether it be the Daily Show or the Nightly News or whatever. So we're right up there with them, Jeff.
Yeah, man, I will say that, silver linings, I guess, in this global pandemic is that it has leveled the playing field between All the Above and, CNN and MSNBC. I mean, we are, essentially using the same technology, same setups as everyone else, and definitely gotten some good positive feedback from folks about how we're keeping the show alive, and it's looking good.
Yeah, most definitely. And if you're used to listening to the podcast version of our show while you commute to work or whatever, you're probably not commuting to work anymore. So this might be a good time for you to check us out on YouTube so you can see our beautiful faces as we discuss all of the issues that are first and foremost on everybody's mind when it comes to education. So, Jeff, fresh episode today. What's on today's agenda?
Well, Manuel, as always, we got a good one for folks, and I am just thrilled about the guests we have coming on today. So we are going to be unpacking a topic that I think is very much front and center in the lives of just about every family in America right now. As all the schools are closed, as parents have become teachers at home, as kids are now engaging in learning, without their teacher, or at least to a large extent without their teacher or teachers, placed right in the laps of everyone in America is perhaps one of the most terrifying aspects of school for people, which is math, right? And folks kind of dealing with their math phobias as they're having to carry out school at home. And so we have two incredible guests, Dana Enriquez-Vontoure, who is a math coach and consultant working with schools and teachers out of Houston. And we have Cara Imm, who is also a math coach and professional developer out of New York City, who works with teachers and school leaders in schools across the country and internationally to help us unpack this kind of issue and this set of questions around what does it look like for us to teach math at home in the new normal of distant learning. So it's going to be a great conversation, Manuel. You definitely want to stick around, folks.
Dope. Looking forward to it. But up first will be our Do Now, where we take a look at recent headlines in the world of education. Stay tuned.
All right, folks, it's time for today's Do Now, where we take a look at some recent headlines in education, particularly some of those stories that might not be getting the level of attention in our national media that they deserve. Manuel, what do we got for today's Do Now?
Well, Jeff, as you recall, last week we talked about grades and how messy this issue of grading is, especially for high school juniors and seniors who are looking to go to college in the fall or next year. And one thing that came up in that discussion is the need for there to be some kind of clarity from state level, federal level, from college systems about what to do about grades for the semester. And we received the beginning of some of that clarity from at least the University of California system and the California State University system, which both unveiled new policies regarding grades for this semester for incoming or hopeful college applicants. So in response to the unfolding COVID-19 crisis and the impact that it's had on our schools, the University of California system announced last week temporary measures that relax undergraduate admissions requirements for students looking to enroll at AUC for this fall and for future years as applicable. The chair of the Board of Regents, which is the governing board of the University of California system, John Perez, said, quote, "We want to help alleviate the tremendous disruption and anxiety that is already overwhelming prospective students due to COVID-19, end quote. And the president of the University of California system, Janet Napolitano, endorsed the changes, saying, quote, "The university's flexibility at this crucial time will ensure prospective students aiming for UC get a full and fair shot, no matter their current challenges." So the changes that they made include suspending the letter grade requirement for those A through G courses, which are required and used as a measure of college readiness. Any of those courses that were completed in the winter, spring, or summer of 2020 no longer need to have a letter grade. The UC system also suspended the standardized test requirement for students who are applying to fall 2021 freshman admission. So they no longer have to take the SAT or the ACT. And they also inserted some flexibility in deadlines for submitting official final transcripts, because as you know, schools being closed, students are going to have a tough time probably getting their final official transcripts on time into the university by the deadlines. So they added some flexibility for that. And for transfer students, the UC system is temporarily suspending the cap on the number of transferable units that have pass or no pass grading. Now, the California State University system followed suit, stating that it will accept grades of credit or pass to satisfy A through G requirements completed during the winter, spring, or summer terms. And the Cal State system also said that it'll assess and initially place students in first-year English and math courses based on multiple measures that students have already submitted, including high school and college courses completed, GPAs, and test scores on the SBAC or ACT or SAT. So in other words, they're being much more flexible with their decision on how to place students for those entry-level English and math courses. And they also announced that if any student has not met the A through G requirements, the Cal State campuses individually can use admissions exceptions on a case-by-case basis if the students are no longer CSU eligible. So in other words, both systems are trying to be much more flexible with their admissions requirements. And we mentioned the need for flexibility in the last episode when it comes to grades and all that. So Jeff, what do you think about these changes?
Well, I think these are actually really important, really welcome changes. I don't think in the end they're going to be quite enough to address the full extent of the need. For example, at this point, we have all but essentially declared school over in the physical sense, school closed for the remainder of this school year. And so I think some of the things that we foresee as problems right now, right, that sort of bubbled their way up to the university systems, the negative effects of those of the closures will compound in some ways as we go forward. So I think there's actually going to be a need for more, but I do want to really give credit where credit is due, which is I think in relatively quick fashion, these two massive university systems, right? We're talking about, tens of thousands of students, right? Over 100,000 students, that are a part of these systems across the largest, systems in the country. Getting, new policy in place to allow high school students at least a fairer set of conditions in which they can apply to and be accepted into, and actually have some of the leeway they need in order to matriculate into, the universities of their choice in the fall. So I think it's great. I think, again, there's probably going to be more that needs to be done, but I'm really happy to see that really within just a few weeks of the shutdown, we've seen pretty substantial movement from these two institutions, which are not historically known for, quick policy decisions in service of kids and communities, right? So I want to give credit there.
Yeah, I'm also impressed by how quickly they've done this, because although it feels like we've been in this self-isolation, quarantine situation, safer at home for like months and months by now, it's really been, 3 weeks? Yeah. And for such a massive university system, or both of the systems, to unveil these changes that quickly, especially considering that I'm assuming they also are having to do all this remotely, and they're not having their in-person giant meetings like before. To me, that's pretty impressive, and it's important, I think, for that message to get to our students, that we see that they are going through something that is unprecedented. And, of course, our juniors and seniors are super stressed already about college and the pressure to go to college and SATs and all these things. So to get the message from such a massive system that, we acknowledge this semester is especially difficult, and we are going to make some modifications to our admissions requirements to meet that. I think that's a very important, maybe, stress reliever for some of our students who are just feeling like the whole world is against them now in terms of their schooling experience. So I'm happy to see that. Of course, more will need to be done, because obviously there's these two systems, as big as they are, they don't account for all the potential colleges that our students are looking to possibly attend. And also, like we mentioned last episode, we're going to need some clarity just for teachers in the K-12 system about what to do regarding grades and these matters. But it is a great first step, a really big first step, I think. And hopefully it's the first of many announcements to come from the various systems that are having to make adjustments to meet our students' needs where they are right now during this crisis.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you mentioned the part about grades. And I think, as we discussed in our last episode with Leo Glaze, about the sort of big question on a lot of schools' minds, and in particular high schools, like, so what do we do about grades? We talked about the sort of dominoes needing to fall in kind of a certain order, right? Because there are at least state level policy considerations around, what does it take to earn a credit, for example, for a high school course? And if you're not earning credits, then you can't graduate. And for a lot of colleges, if you haven't graduated from high school, you're not eligible to enter into the college, right? And then we get into the, in a state like California, into the A to G requirements, right? Which are essentially just the sort of liberal arts swath of courses that high school kids have to take and pass with a grade of C or better in order to be even eligible for the UC or the CSU systems, right? And so I think we're starting to see the dominoes fall, right? We're seeing the university system make some accommodations. I think we'll see the state make some accommodations around seat time requirements for earning credit. I think we will see, then things like, the NCAA will follow suit and give some leeway around, GPA for eligibility requirements, and those sorts of things. I think will start to fall from this as well. And I'm really glad to see that we're so far seeing people come to reasonable conclusions, right? Like, kids should not be harmed by this. We're going to have to do some extraordinary things in terms of policy changes to ensure that we are not creating situations where the already privileged are even more privileged, or where, a sort of, neutral type policies don't have unintended consequences that exacerbate racial and economic gaps that are already present in our system. So it's not perfect. We haven't arrived yet, but these are important first steps. And I do want to applaud our state university systems for taking the first steps in this direction.
Yeah, most definitely. And of course, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that this massive UC system also includes the #1 public university in the world, UCLA. And I'm happy to see that the number one public university in the world, is part of this change to make admission requirements a little more flexible for this generation of juniors and seniors. And also speaking to what you said about high school graduation requirements, I know in our district, one of our graduation requirements has to do with community service or internship hours, and a lot of seniors, unsurprisingly, kind of wait till the end of senior year to start really getting those hours going to meet that. And our district so far has announced that they're gonna waive that requirement for this year. And I hope other districts are looking at their graduation requirements, the ones above and beyond the basic seat time credit situation, and looking for ways to address the fact that students, they had a last day of school that they did not realize was going to be the last day of school.
No.
And they had big plans for this spring, and they were not able to achieve those plans. And any of those plans that relate to graduating, hopefully districts across the country are looking at those requirements and making some adjustments as necessary. All right, Jeff, so that's it for today's Do Now. Up next, we'll have a seminar segment looking at the teaching of math in this COVID-19 learn from home era. Stay tuned.
All right, folks, welcome to today's seminar. I am super excited to have with us two incredible guests who are going to help us unpack a really interesting issue that I think just about every family in America is confronting nowadays. In this world where most schools across the country are closed, and where parents have become teachers at home and students have become distance learners all at once, all together, one of the more interesting questions is what is happening with mathematics? The subject that is maybe unique among all subjects in school, where people feel comfortable saying things like, well, I'm not a math person, or she's just not good at math, now is square in the laps of everyone at home trying to make sense of math and math education. So we have two great guests with us today to help us explore this topic. We have Dana Enriquez-Vontoure and we have Cara Imm. Now, let me tell you a little bit about these guests. They are both powerful math educators unto themselves. So Dana Enriquez-Vontoure has more than 20 years of experience in education. She began her teaching career through Teach for America as a kinder teacher in Houston, and later became a middle school math teacher where she was acknowledged as one of the district's highly effective teachers. Dana has since held roles as a math content specialist, a curriculum manager for nearly 200 schools, and a secondary math coach. She has reviewed and written assessment items for the Texas state assessments, for the NAEP and for PARCC. And Dana has sat on the Mathematics Advisory Board for the Houston Children's Museum, the Council of Great City Schools, and on the Advisory Committee for Mathematics with the Texas Education Agency. Currently, Dana is the president of Vontoure Learning, which provides K-8 and algebra professional development and customized supports for schools and teacher teams. Welcome, Dana, to all the above.
Welcome.
We also have with us Dr. Cara Imm. Cara is a K-12 math educator based out of New York City. In her more than 20-year career, she has been a middle and high school math teacher, a staff developer, a coach, and teacher education professor. In her current role with the organization Math in the City, which is based at City College in New York, she develops teachers and math communities across the country and internationally. She's an author of articles and books on the teaching of mathematics, and just this week, she completed her PhD in urban education at the Graduate Center at the City University of New York. So Dr. Imm, freshly new Dr. Imm, is with us. Her research explored the impact of mathematical modeling for high school girls of color who have experienced the gatekeeping effects of algebra. Welcome, Cara, to all the above.
Thank you so much.
Well, thank you both for being on our show, especially during this very tough time. Now, schools across the country are trying to do the remote learning, distance learning thing because most districts in most states have shut down the in-person education because of the COVID-19 crisis. So that means the important work of students learning or continuing their learning of math is now squarely in the crosshairs of kids and their families at home. So we, I guess, are curious, what's your sense of how it's going so far? Maybe we'll start with Dana.
So I think it's something new for all of us, not just as teachers, but as parents, just human beings, period. This is all completely new to everyone. I think that I see in my area that districts are definitely trying to balance the technology piece, like the access, the equity, like who has technology, who doesn't, who has internet, who doesn't, who receives paper packets, who doesn't need them, but we're all trying to learn at the same time. We see right now, we do see on our one of our TV stations that two of our big school districts in the area are actually been filming and putting out little mini lessons, both in English and Spanish. So we see a movement of support trying to take place. The question of equity is still out there, though.
For sure. I've spent the last 2 weeks or so talking to folks from around the country, and where I land in all those conversations with parents, principals, coaches, and even professors is reminds me of a blog post called "Dear Educators, This is a Lot," in which the author describes that our efforts to keep children learning right now are at best artificial and at worst harmful. And that's a particular take, but I know from talking to folks in the field that it feels like a lot, no matter who you are, and that depending on the kind of support you had, the instruction looks really, really different. So I'm thinking in particular of the rollout of instruction between Berkeley and Oakland, where I have some colleagues. In Berkeley, they announced that 40% of the teaching force would be full-time caregivers, and up to 30% of the kids wouldn't have the right technology to kind of flip a switch, so to speak, and move in-person instruction to online. And so they took their time. And the message to teachers was, whatever you can offer in these first few weeks is enough right now until we get a handle on technology and support for teachers. And so the rollout, I think, on the other end felt very slow and felt not that urgent. Meanwhile, in Oakland, they first met basic needs. So they, given any form of food scarcity, they wanted to make sure kids had access to basic livelihoods like, meals during the day. And once they could assure that was happening, they developed continuity of learning plans. The message there to teachers was learning will continue. We have extremely high standards for kids, and we don't want to have what people are now calling a COVID slide, where kids are losing material, right? And so the message in these two neighboring communities, I think, is really fascinating in terms of how your leadership, how the framing of what exactly are we doing here really matters. And in terms of teachers, I hear a lot of people saying, I'm doing everything I know how to do, and I still feel like a failure. Or I'm not used to teaching in such a way where I don't get that kind of immediate feedback. A colleague named Marcel Good described, she said, I feel like my whole life as a teacher, it's been like being a stage actor. And in a stage actor, you can look out into the crowd and you can get the response of laughter, of, like all that kind of nonverbal kind of affirmation that this is going as planned. And she said, now I'm a movie star and I don't know how to get the kind of response that I need to make sure that my lessons are kind of landing, right? That also includes half of her class, in some cases isn't present. She said she feels like more and more like a college professor, where the most satisfying part of her day is office hours, and she just waits to see who shows up. And there's these really beautiful connections, but there's also kids she hasn't heard from, which is true for most of the teachers I talk to as well. So I think everyone's feeling it's a lot and doing the very best they can. And the models were rolled out so differently with such different sources of support. It looks really different, I think.
Yeah. So, I think from my perspective, I have seen, many of the challenges that you've both spoken to there. And also, so much changed all at once that I think we were in this space where no one really knew exactly what to expect, right? And now that we're kind of in many parts of the country, at least about 3 weeks into this sort of new normal, I'm wondering what, if anything, you've seen that has perhaps surprised you or been unexpected.
Dana, you want to take that one?
I think one thing that has surprised me is we've always we hear about these jokes We always see the memes on social media about teachers and how easy they have it, and they don't work over the summer, and they get off spring break, and they get off Christmas. And now you see that whole mindset completely shift to where you see all these memes like, I don't care what that teacher asked for next year, I'm going to do it all. If they want 50 glue sticks, I'm buying 50 glue sticks. So I think for me, in terms of my heart, like the appreciation that people are now developing for teachers, which has been a long time coming, is finally there. So that's very exciting for me. I think also in terms of my field of work and coaching and working with a lot of teachers, is that teachers have been okay with like asking, hey, can you shoot a video teaching this and send it to me, because I want to load it in my classroom video chat. I want to load it in Teams. I want to load it in Google Zoom, whatever they're using. And I'm like, sure. Whereas sometimes when you're walking into a classroom and you're like, I'm here, I can model a lesson, I can work with you. Sometimes it's kind of like, well, now that we're all kind of swimming in this new territory, right? And we're like trying to put this content that all of a sudden teachers just has been asked to make overnight and load into these different platforms. I feel like there's definitely like, let me reach out to all resources that live out there and try to get some support. So those are two big things that I've kind of seen mindset wise start to shift.
Great. Yeah, there have been some interesting surprises. I've heard from lots of folks, particularly who work in kind of urban areas, of, I guess, the surprise of having really strong relationships with kids up until the pandemic, and being surprised that those same kids are not present in any of the distance learning ways. Either they're kind of logging on, but not producing any work, or they're not participating, or in some cases, they're just absent from all communications. And that's been really tough for teachers who have, teachers build such close relationships with kids, and you just hope that those strong relationships carry over. And it's been a surprise to many of my colleagues that in some cases, kids are clearly occupied with other more urgent things, like probably caretaking, right? Or just managing the home, or there might be other things getting in the way. But to hear nothing from kids who you had such a close relationship with and who you kind of saw daily, who are part of your community, has been both a surprise and really hard for some teachers, I know. And two other surprises about kind of just this distance learning kind of as a medium. One is that I've talked to lots of folks who describe that if you have kind of any social anxiety, that there's a pretty kind of high barrier to participation in many of these formats. You might not want to see yourself on video or want to see your whole 5th grade class or 9th grade class day in, day out. And you're used to maybe being the kid who hides a bit. There's no hiding in these platforms, particularly if you're doing synchronous or live lessons. And so that can be really hard for kids. Yes, you can turn off the screen, but then that takes away one of the ways that your teacher knows that the lesson is kind of landing. And so there's that kind of tension there. Another surprise that's probably not as critical is just the idea that for some kids, working independently, getting some like deliverable on Monday that they have to complete by Friday, and being able to structure their time and like not having the nonsense of group work and a math partner who doesn't listen to you, has been a relief for some kids. Like, I get to work on my own finally. Like, this is what I've wanted the whole time. So I think those are kind of three surprises that this kind of new environment has brought out for folks.
Now, Dana, you mentioned something pretty interesting to me about folks asking if you could create a video that they could then incorporate into their own whatever Google Classroom or online service, whatever they use. What other questions or needs have you got a sense of from either teachers or families and kids during this effort to try to continue their math learning from home?
So one of the pieces I found that just from social media, and this was, my Facebook is not public. That's just a personal for my Facebook, but I found out lots of friends reaching out to me saying, hey, there's so many resources right now that are being put out there and that are free. Like, which math program, if I'm going to have my kid log on to one, what should it be? And so I always have to kind of start off with, well, I don't know all of them. Let me just tell you the ones that I know, and let me tell you the ones that I put my own kids on. And so that piece has kind of come out. And then the piece of supporting, like, I get started, I think in 1 week, I answered 54 problems where people were taking pictures of problems that their kids had to solve. And they were like, I have no clue how to teach them this. And things that parents may be embarrassed to say, to email back the teacher, like, I don't know what this is. So I don't know what you're talking about. So I don't know how to help my child, and my child is stuck. And so trying to educate, I think, my friends and the community that I'm close to then led to me saying, hey, why don't I start making these videos, strategies and different things that I teach my child. And I winded up posting them on just my Facebook page alone. A lot of them that strategies that I've learned from going to different math workshops. Like, that's how I know Cara. Like, some of them I've learned working with her. And so I started making those, and that led to, well, by the way, principals seeing that and saying, you're already a coach at our school. Can you shoot number one thing I probably get asked to is do a problem of the day. When they put a problem of the day, it's a word problem. And how would you solve this? So that piece has led me to doing that work. I try to incorporate my daughters because I want them to be a part of it. So it's something that we can do together. But I have that flexibility, so to speak, at home to be able to do that right now because I'm not working at all. And so because of that, I've been trying to use my time to do things like that. So I'm trying to put out as many videos, like, never had a YouTube channel, just started one from scratch, just so that I could start posting different things. And I just started getting random requests from teachers that I've never met before, never worked with, saying, hey, how would I solve this? And a lot of the questions are showing up in, like, platforms that they're using, or banks, or, different programs that they're using. And they may not be familiar with it, but their district might have immediately purchased it so that they could use it to support their teaching. And so it's not something that teachers have had time to study yet and look through and solve through. They're just seeing it show up, and they're like, hey, I got to be ready to go with this tomorrow. So we try to do a 24-hour turnaround. And we've been, I say we, it's just me. But I've been pretty good about it so far. I think to date, I did 54 in 1 week, but I think now I've got to be close to like 80 or 90 questions, and just trying to solve from different parents and just different teachers that just keep inboxing me. And so I felt like that's the way that I could be supportive, because what I do know is that I don't want someone to feel like they're alone, a teacher, a student, or a parent. And I don't want someone to teach something wrong. There's nothing wrong with reaching out to someone. And so that's done confidential. So I don't share like, oh, this Miss So-and-so sent this to me. I'll just say, this is a request that I got, and I just solve it, and I post it for everybody.
Nice, nice. And Cara, you mentioned a lot of the challenges that come with trying to teach remotely. And I was wondering if within that, if there are any particular needs or questions that you've been getting from teachers or families or schools as it pertains to trying to learn math under all of these circumstances.
Yeah. I definitely initially got a lot of questions about what Dana was referring to. What curriculum is best? What app is going to work for my community? And to be honest, it feels like the math marketplace is really full. And so I do understand why people, even before the pandemic, were wading through resources. Resources are not the problem in math education. Quality resources is the problem. And so now we're in a marketplace where it seems like anybody with any form of humanity is giving away their work for free. So I actually didn't make videos. I thought, Dana's there. There's lots of good people making great videos and products and problems of the day. One movement that I think has not been tapped, and I think we're going to be moving closer to it, is this idea of math at home. I mean, if you think about those of us who kind of love mathematics as inquiry, understand that it's this human endeavor, that mathematics was created by humans to make sense of the world. And so this is a moment like 9/11 where the world has given us a curriculum. And whatever part of the curriculum makes sense to you today, whether that's a neighborhood walk or planning the family budget for groceries or monitoring water use, or even thinking about the kind of COVID-19 as a big messy issue. Like, there's lots of things in our days that can be mathematized in families, in homes, that I think it might be the direction that feels better for a lot of people, because it doesn't require resources, technology. It requires parents to ask kids really interesting questions about what's happening right in front of them. So I like that trend. It seems like now we're in this for several more weeks, if not the rest of the school year. And there's school districts where there's no new math instruction happening. Like they've made a stance that like, we're going to try to make sure that we just review for the rest of the year. And like, that's lots of weeks of review. Meanwhile, there's other school districts that are trying to figure out, how do you do inquiry? How do you do really rich problem solving in a remote way? And it's really tricky. So there is a need there to think about how to do that. And I think the answer to that is look around you and mathematize questions that your children have, right? And maybe the teacher kind of facilitates how to do that. So we could support teachers to know how to do that.
And one thing, just to piggyback off of what Cara said, myself being a mom and having two daughters, and I'm an educator, and there's times that I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to stress about what was given. Let's just do what we normally do. And so I said, hey, we're gonna cook together. I had this idea, we're gonna cook together, right? We're gonna cook together. There's so much math in cooking, right? And so my daughter made a mistake of putting 1 tablespoon versus 1 teaspoon. And I didn't say anything. So I don't know what we were making, but it was something like cayenne pepper. She was putting cayenne pepper in there. And
that's a big difference in cayenne pepper, Dana.
You got to make that mistake one time, and then you realize there's a difference between a teaspoon and a tablespoon. Mm-hmm. And then she starts digging through the drawer, and then she lays them all out. And then she's like, oh, look, Mom, this says 1/4 of a cup, but it's not in a cup. It looks like a spoon. So why isn't it called 1/4 of a tablespoon? So then we start having all these discussions, and she starts figuring these things out. And I thought to myself, that's a math lesson that'll never take place in a textbook.
Yeah. I'm so glad you both, have spoken to that, the sort of ways in which math is present in our daily lives that we often just don't even think about. But then when we talk about math in school, we sometimes talk about it as though it's like this big, scary monster living in the hillside that, that's going to come eat us, right? When we interact with it in many ways, just in normal daily life. I saw a sort of a meme the other day that a friend of mine sent me. There was a graph of a parabola talking about, the average hours per day I've spent looking at exponential growth over the last week. And I was like, what a perfect way to capture what's happening to everyone. And I actually want to kind of probe a little bit deeper into this issue of the world giving us a curriculum right now, Cara, that you mentioned. And so on the one hand, that excites me as an educator and as someone who appreciates math. But also I can see that being scary and being difficult for people to grapple with, both because of the kind of emotional content of that curriculum, which is a pandemic, but also because the kind of math that you're naming is different than a lot of the way that people experienced math in school themselves, right? And like folks who kind of grew up in the kind of flashcard, teacher does a problem on the board and the kids copy it, and then you do the odd problems at home type of a life, right? And so, in this world where we have a rich curriculum presented to us, but we have people who didn't engage with math in that way, what are some things you think, that might help families make use of that curriculum that's in front of us?
Yeah, I think, and when I say the world hands you a curriculum, I mean that any aspect of your new normal, from living in your home to co-quarantining to, all of it. And it's highly traumatic stuff for sure. So I want to be really sensitive when I say the world hands you a curriculum, go explore it. It's going to be kind of trauma inducing for lots of kids. But I think the point I was trying to get at also is that we've lost this idea that math is designed to make sense of the world, that school mathematics and lived mathematics have felt really, really different for kids for a long time. And this is one more example of how worksheets from your teacher or flashcards feel really disconnected to the kind of math that a lot of us are kind of really focused on, like Thinking about all the ratios that are present in this virus and how data is collected, and what does it mean to flatten the curve? I mean, these are questions I think that are appropriate probably for high school kids to take up and to connect to the school mathematics they were already doing. I know a lot of teachers who believe or have believed in a common core like mathematics, and realize that that at home parents might be reverting to math that they know. And they say right now, that's okay. Like if kids come back and they're carrying the one, I can live with that because at least they're doing something, right? At least they're engaging with families. So I think that's not the most urgent thing right now. I think people have, we'll figure that out. It points to the idea that we still have a lot of work to do with families to understand why we care so much about the mathematics that we're doing with kids. And that's not going to fix in this environment or right now. So I feel like a lot of people are letting go of that. Like if it's flashcards and that engages your child and keeps you able to do your work, I think then it's flashcards. It's not ideal, but it's like what we have right now.
I was going to say, I think one of the things that we can't control, that we have to let go of right now, is understanding that there is no true way that we can assess the quality of work, the quality of learning, or the quality of teaching, because this is new to all of us. But for years, teachers understand what it's like to start the beginning of a school year and have to close gaps or get kids caught up to where they need to be to get ready for the current content. So I believe strongly that that's going to happen, that every school, every classroom across this nation and this world is going to make sure that we start the school year off with some type of review to go back and say, hey, we're not sure if everybody had access to technology, if everybody's parent went and picked up a packet. We're not sure if your parents had time to sit and do some math with you every day. So we're going to need to supplement and close some gaps, and we're going to do it, and we're going to be great, and we're going to be fine. So I feel strongly about families not overly stressing themselves about the quality of teaching that their child is getting right now from them. I just want kids to be happy, and it's a tough time to be happy. I mean, you're missing your friends, right? Even my daughter, who's like, hey, I want to be homeschooled. I have an older one who wants to be homeschooled all the time. And now she's like, I really miss seeing Miss So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so. I really miss my friends, like, things like that. And there's nothing I can do to supplement that, right? We're just trying to make every day feel somewhat normal, and it's absolutely not normal at all. I even kind of push back with saying homeschool, because this is not school. Right? This is not school. This is not the school that we signed up for. And so I don't want to try to normalize something that's completely not normal for them. So every day it's kind of like, hey, we're going to do the best that we can. We're going to make the best out of it. And it is what it is. But I feel confident that when the school year starts, that schools are going to do what they need to do to kind of get all kids back together and get them where they need to be. And I think that's what I feel like a lot of parents are so worried that their kid is going to fall behind. And maybe they are, maybe they're not, but educators for years know what it's like to bring kids back up to speed. We can't assume the quality of learning that has been taking place during this time period or this situation at all. So it's going to happen. We are definitely going to get kids caught back up.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because we've been speaking recently on the show about grades, for example, and how messy of a issue it is in terms of how do you even grade or assess student work during this time. And it seems to be a real dynamic out there between those who are focused on the traditional academic learning that must go on, school must go on, and those who are like, wait, this is a moment where we got to call time out and really think about how this is impacting us as just on that social and emotional level, because this is a traumatic experience that we're all dealing with at various levels in different ways. And that sort of push-pull between keep school going and wait, time out, school maybe isn't the most important thing right now, because our kids are seeing these, seeing the news and hearing about this, and there's bigger matters on the table. So that's a really difficult, I think, arena for educators to wrap their heads around, because we're so used to keeping our units going, and I'm usually teaching about this at this time of year, and how am I going to do that maybe through Google Classroom. But that overall question of like what this giant experience means for education, and more specifically, like what opportunities maybe we could see within this dynamic to sort of rethink the way we do things, or rethink how, in this, for example, how math is taught. I was wondering if either of you could speak to, we already talked about how this presents us with the opportunity to at least think about math in our lived everyday experience and math from the home in that sense. But I was wondering if either of you could speak to what other opportunities you think this experience might be offering us in education for how to really think about the teaching and learning of math, or of academic content in general.
Sure. I'll start with that one. Where kids are turning in work, teachers are saying, I finally have enough time to look at the work. That's the only thing I have. And so at some level, if you are getting some pieces, if you have that kind of robust digital platform, or you're getting photographs of kids' work and the work is interesting, this is for some teachers the first time they've actually ever seen and had enough time to really look carefully at student work and not have to grade it, right? And so then there's this like beautiful feedback loop. So best case scenario, we're spending more time, because we're not in the presence of children, looking at their work. That's all we have. And then giving them feedback. And maybe that feedback is designed to kind of give them ideas about going forward. I'm thinking about how the silver lining might be, and my hope is that not only have tests been suspended this year, but that we take a nice big breath from standardized testing next year too. And in a field like mathematics, where we start testing kids earlier and earlier and do it annually and kind of over test kids, I think the country is right to say we don't need standardized tests, not only this year, but next year. And next year we come back and we first and foremost welcome kids back to school and reset around, this is this beautiful educational community that does so much more than produce a series of lessons, right? And check off a series of standards. That's a very, very small part of what it means to go to school, and part of the value that we offer, right, as teachers. And so I think teachers will need some support around dealing with trauma themselves and in the lives of their students. And there'll be some really rich community building together to welcome kids back, assuming we're back in the fall. And then we can start to think about, without the presence of a standardized test looming, where are we now? We were already not in the same place. So this idea that we're going to have this massive catch up, there were already kids in our classroom who weren't on grade level. That's the norm. That's kind of human learning. So the question is, how do we artfully take a year to breathe and let kids, let teachers kind of figure out where kids are and move together as a class, move together as a grade, whatever that looks like. That's my best, my aspirational hope of what might happen. Yeah. Dana, do you want to say more?
Yeah, I think just in terms of what the learning experiences are for us, and what teachers are thinking about, I think about teachers, like a lot of things that we hear teachers, administrators, students, and families all talking about is technology, 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 technology. Either the access to technology or the absence of technology. And I'm going to keep pushing this equity issue where certain schools, everybody has a laptop or an iPad, or the school is capable of checking out iPads and laptops. And then we have other schools where that's not happening. And we're in the same district. So I think that's one piece that we're starting to be very mindful and realizing that all schools don't have that same access to technology. I do think that a lot of teachers and administrators are concerned about accountability, the testing piece. It's nice. It is so nice that has been put on hold for this year. In Texas, they've said we're already next year, it will kick back. It'll be back. That's a whole different debate. But I just wonder if that's the type of stress that schools and students and teachers need to be under when we're just very first coming back from such a traumatic event. So I don't know, maybe they'll rethink it, maybe they won't. And then I think that families are definitely going to need support coming back and understanding. And I do think there is going to be a greater appreciation for what schools provide for the community. So that's very exciting. But I think the quality of the education that we give now, people have realized is they value it way more than it's been in the past.
Yeah. For our last question, and I'm sad to ask the last question because I would love to keep talking to you both for hours about this stuff. But you're both people that I have appreciated, from afar. Dana, in your case, in your work with teachers and teachers of mathematics, and Cara from up close when I lived in New York and when we worked together at one point. But you're both people that I think when folks think about what school is and what the impact of the school closures is, they might not think of you and people like you first, right? They think of their teacher and they think of the principal and the people in the office and that sort of thing. But there's this whole world of people around your teachers and your principal and the folks in the office who work with schools and help teachers and work with teams of teachers and work with schools to help bring the work that people want to do to life. And I'm wondering if you can give us some insight as being educators who kind of work in that space. How have the shutdowns impacted you and impacted your work?
I'll use an image to describe what happened. I work in schools all across New York City, and then on the side, I work in schools across the country, and my days are filled supporting and building mathematical communities in schools. I walk into classrooms where they know me as Miss Cara, and there's oh, Miss Cara's here, it's time to do math, where I'm a regular participant in people's classrooms, but these are not my own classrooms. And so one by one, starting about 3.5, 4 weeks ago, things just started to get canceled. It was a workshop here, it was a night class here, it was a day in a school there. And my calendar that was kind of if you can imagine a Google calendar full of color, as each event got canceled, I turned it gray. And before I knew, I look up and my calendar was kind of for its foreseeable future, just a shade of gray, right? And so all those chances to be in schools were noticeably gone. I think right now we're seeing the primacy of the relationship between the classroom teacher and their students. And I don't want to get in the way of that. I mean, the rank and file teachers are doing the heavy lifting here. And even friends of mine who are assistant principals and principals have noted to me, I hope I'm doing enough. I'm not really sure what else there is to do. Really, the teaching and learning always has been between teachers and their kids in that classroom space. And so I haven't felt very vital, and I've made myself really available. But for now, I've just had to pivot, and my work has essentially disappeared for the short term. And I'm just hoping that I can help teachers and school communities think through the transition back to in-person school when we're ready and how to make sense of that. And I hope I have enough in my toolkit that includes dealing with trauma and building math communities and also teaching really rich mathematics that I'll be of value when that time comes.
And for me, so I have other coaches that work for me, and we go out in the schools. Our work has completely stopped, and it's been a little scary, very scary. So just everything has been canceled. Same thing, fly across the United States, working in different school districts or working with different schools. So that work has all ceased, and so we're all at home. And it's scary, just like it is for everybody else. But I felt like the best way I could make myself available, and also to keep me happy, my sanity happy, was addressing, the jokes, or when people were calling like, "Oh, we're going to borrow today," or "We're going to carry the one," and kind of addressing those memes and saying, "Hey, I'm going to shoot some videos to explain why we want kids to use a different language." And surprisingly, the feedback's been great, and parents have been like, "Oh, now I get it. Now I see what you're talking about." So that's kind of cheered me up and kept me happy. But our work has completely stopped. Hopefully, in the future, when things get going again, I'll be excited to support teachers. I miss being in the classrooms. I miss the kids. I miss the teachers a lot. Social media has allowed me to keep in touch with everyone. But it's hard. I work in lots of schools that have high needs, and I miss the kids. I'm there enough to know them well enough by name, and I miss them. And I just, my heart it aches at night because I hope that they're okay. It's starting to get hot here in Texas, and I worry about, food. I worry about AC for them. I know, technology is not there. So I just hope that they know that we're going to be ready for them when we get past this.
Yeah. Well, Cara and Dana, just want to thank you both for taking the time to join us today and to talk through these just really interesting issues about, kind of the new normal and the teaching of math at home. And really appreciate your expertise coming all the way from New York City and from Houston. So thank you for joining us on All the Above.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
All right, folks, next up is today's Class Dismissed. All right, folks, it's time for today's Class Dismissed, where we like to pause and give some shout outs for a moment to people in education doing some great work. Manuel, who do we got today?
All right, so today we want to shout out a fantastic educator. A lot of you know him from Twitter. His name is Jose Vilson, aka the JLV on Twitter. Mr. Vilson is a decorated math teacher and a real giant in our field. He's the author of This Is Not a Test. He's a nationally board certified teacher. He's given TED Talks. He's the co-founder of #EduColor, which is a dialogue and a movement to center the voices and experiences of Black, Indigenous, people of color in education conversations. And he's been trumpeting equity way before it became a popular, buzzworthy type of term among all of your education favorites. So we want to shout him out today because, like the rest of us, Mr. Vilson's teaching practice has been relegated to his living room during this coronavirus pandemic and is trying to teach middle school math to his middle schoolers from home. And of course, like we just discussed in today's seminar, that's a big challenge. And he decided to take to Instagram Live to make his math lessons live for anybody to see. Now, of course, celebrities and various content creators have been going to Instagram Live with concerts and all sorts of things that they're doing from their house. And Mr. Vilson went there to show his math instruction, pedagogical skills, and be there for parents as well so that they could help their kids in learning the math. Now, Jeff, a lot of teachers are really skittish about opening up their classroom to others. And this is a case where Mr. Vilson is opening up his classroom to the world, really, and doing it in such a way that his students' privacy, of course, is intact since they are not appearing on the videos themselves. And he's opening up his pedagogy for everybody to see. And we just think that's really dope, utilizing various social media platforms to keep the math instruction going. And we just want to shout him out for letting us all be witness to this dope math instruction that's coming out of New York City, out of his living room.
Yeah, big props to the JLV. Love seeing his work on Twitter for sure. And folks, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate, as always, your support. And our website is aotashow.com. That's where you can go to find all of our content, every single thing we do. We are on all your major podcast providers. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, we're on YouTube. And especially at this time when everybody's at home and everybody's looking for a new podcast or a new show to follow, why not share all the above, folks? So if you like what you see, please pass the word along to someone you know who might be interested as well. And we look forward to seeing you next time.